Let's talk today about you not letting other people affect you negatively, at least not nearly as often. Because what happens with a lot of us is that someone will do something or say something, and then it will trigger something in us. It will bring up something in us, and then we will have this like big intense emotional reaction, not necessarily meaning that we act out on it, that we are like screaming and yelling, although sometimes that happens, but that we're just having this big intense emotion that comes up that's extremely uncomfortable, that does not feel good. And then often that feeling kind of stays, or we go around and around in our head about it for the day, or maybe even longer, and it can ruin an entire day. Someone else doing or saying something that brings up something in us can ruin our entire day, and then it doesn't feel good. And it can also cause other problems in our lives, meaning that we start to try and avoid everyone or everything that's going to bring up an uncomfortable emotion, and that's also not a great strategy. Just as an aside, when I say the word trigger, I'm not talking about like the clinical PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder sense of the word trigger. I'm talking more about sort of the everyday triggers that a lot of us have, maybe not all of us every day, but often enough where something is happening on the outside of us. Someone is doing something or saying something or something is going on, and then it hits something in us. It hits a wound, it hits a sore spot, it hits a sensitive spot, and then we have an intense emotional reaction to it. Usually a disproportionate reaction to it, right? Usually our feeling that we have from it is bigger than the thing that happened itself. And usually in hindsight, we're like, wow, I don't know why I got so upset about that. I don't know why that, I found that so difficult. But in the moment, it feels really huge. And so we're going to talk about that sense of the word trigger. If you're new here, welcome to our incredible little corner on the internet. Take a second, introduce yourself in the comment section below. If you're back again, say hello. I love being able to connect with all of you here. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. The button is about right down there. And then you get notified when my new videos come out. Either way, my name is Kristina, and I am a registered clinical therapist, a researcher, a coach, and the creator of my incredible membership community, the Shift Society, that you can get more information about in the description below. I help heart-centered go-getter men and women break through the crap that is holding them back so that they can like themselves and their lives more every day. And dealing with these triggers, dealing with not letting other people impact us so negatively is going to help us like ourselves and our lives more every day. It's pretty self-explanatory. And I think that it's so important that we learn how to deal with things, people, words, actions that impact us negatively, that doesn't involve just never being around anything that impacts us negatively. Because I've heard a lot of advice out there in the personal development space, in the mental wellness space, that says just cut out any kind of negative person, any kind of difficult person, cut out any kind of quote unquote toxic person, which, I kind of take issue with that term in the first place, but that's a whole other topic for a whole other day. But this idea that we have to remove everything from our lives that isn't lovely or pleasant or delightful or easy. And in a perfect world, maybe that would be great, but that's just not the reality for most of us. And it's not actually even good for all of us. Because if we're only ever doing things that are simple, straightforward, and easy, then we don't get to grow. We don't get to learn. We don't get to expand. And as human beings, that is part of our DNA. It's part of what we are designed for, is for learning, for growing, for expanding, for taking on challenges, for dealing with things and getting through things. And now I'm not saying that you should go out and only ever be around people that you find difficult, that trigger your stuff and that bring up all these things for you. I'm not saying that by no means. We absolutely need people in our lives that are 100% on our side, that are supportive, that are loving, that are encouraging, that are safe. We need those people in our lives. We need that kind of safe landing, but we also need to be venturing out. We also need to be taking things on that are more challenging, which means taking on ourselves, taking on our own emotions when we are around people who do things and say things that we don't like. And just as an aside here, I think we know I'm not talking about people that are like harmful and abusive. I'm not saying go and put yourself in harm's way. I'm saying go and put yourself in situations that push you to grow, to learn. And I've talked about this story before, how I have several offices that I rent out to other counselors, and I've had several counselors in the years I've been doing this. I rent these offices out part-time to them as they're starting their private practices, and most of them are easy and lovely and it's straightforward, and we sign our lease and I hardly ever hear from them. But every once in a while there's someone that's a little, in my idea, challenging. And I remember the first time this happened, there was a counselor that I was renting to that I found some of her requests, some of her ideas challenging. And I remember talking to my husband about it and saying, oh my gosh, this person is totally pushing my buttons. What she's saying, I think is unreasonable. I don't want to deal with this. And he's like, no. This is good. This is good, Julia. There are going to be people that you come across in your life that are going to push your buttons, that are going to be difficult. And if you don't learn how to deal with them, if you don't learn how to deal with yourself when you're with them, then it's going to make your life a lot harder than it needs to be. This is good. There's people in our lives that push us so that we can grow. That when something is triggering to us, instead of running away, which again, that's our natural human tendency. When we are feeling triggered, right? Triggered is just something is coming up for us, something has happened, and then we have very intense thoughts about what that is that's happening, not always consciously, right? We often think like, oh, this thing happened, this person said this, and now all of a sudden I feel awful. But it's because in like this split second, my brain has interpreted what they were saying in a certain way. My brain has made that mean something about me. Maybe my brain has like brought up other times. So if someone's like, oh, you're an idiot. And then we have this big trigger and we're like, oh my gosh, now I feel completely terrible that someone called me an idiot. It's likely because there's a wound there that you may have been mistreated when you were younger, that you may have been told really mean things about yourself when you were younger, and there's some pain there, there's some wounds there, and it hit that. And so you're having this more intense response to it. So then what happens when we are feeling triggered is our natural human tendency is to try to get away from the discomfort as quickly as possible. Right? It's a big part of our primitive brain. Its job is to move us away from pain and towards pleasure. And so it's going to try to get us out of uncomfortable feelings by running away from it, running away from the situations that's creating the uncomfortable feelings as quickly as possible. Instead of using that as an opportunity to learn and grow, to be able to see our triggers as our teachers. When something is coming up for me, instead of trying to always avoid everything that challenges us, get curious about what is being challenged. Why am I having this big emotional reaction to this? What wound is this hitting? What past pain is this touching on? What am I making this mean about me? Why am I having such an intense emotional response to this? And then from there, we can decide what we want to do about it. We can decide how we want to respond to whatever it is that is happening, whatever that was said or done. So I want to give you a little bit of an example of this one. Because I've been doing this work on managing my mind and sort of understanding what's going on in my brain, and have been working on this using the exact tools that I teach in the Shift Society. I have been using them on myself to rewire my brain. And so I don't get triggered nearly as often anymore, but it still comes up sometimes. And this was one that kind of surprised me. This happened a little while ago, where it was on social media, which social media, another topic for another day. But I came across a post where someone was kind of calling out someone's work, or a human being whose work I really value, someone who I think is a pretty stand-up human being, someone who has contributed really valuable things to the world, who I think is doing really incredible work. And this person was calling them out on something. And when I read what they were calling them out on, my personal thought was that it was pretty far-reaching, that it was pretty kind of nitpicky, that it was not, that what this person had done was not harmful, that this person was almost just trying to find something. And I didn't like that. And I felt triggered by it. I was like, how dare they? How dare they try to smear this person's name over something like this? Like, I get it. If someone, it doesn't matter how, famous or important or whatever you are, if you're doing something that's harmful, yes, you need to be called out for that. You need to take responsibility for that. But I didn't think that this was anywhere near anything like that. So I was like almost like, how dare you try to smear this person's name? And so I made a comment on their post and I, said something pretty, but I think I said something like, this doesn't seem helpful. And then that triggered something in them. So then they snapped back at me with a pretty kind of clippy response. And then I was taking a second and I was, going around and I was like, okay, what do I want to say back? And how do I want to deal with this? And it was almost like I needed to prove that I was right. And I needed to get them to see it my way. And I was kind of going around in my head, what could I say to them so that I could change how they were thinking, right? So often we do this. We want to change what other people are thinking or doing so that we can feel okay. And so I was like, what am I going to say to make them realize that what they did was wrong or bad, in my opinion, was not right? And I actually spent a few hours kind of going around in my head being like, how could I respond to this? How could I reply to this? And then I realized I don't need to. I don't actually need to engage in this conversation. I don't need this person to agree with me. I don't need this person to see things my way. I don't need to change them in order for me to feel okay. They are allowed to have their own thoughts, and I am allowed to let them. And thinking about so often how we get pulled into things, how we get triggered by something, and then we're trying to change someone else. We're trying to make someone else do something or act in a certain way or see something our way, so that we no longer have to feel triggered about it. Instead of taking a step back and really unpacking, why is this bothering me? Why is this coming up for me? And maybe there are going to be situations where someone has actually done something harmful, where you do want to speak up about that, where you do want to pursue that, where you do want to, not just sort of leave it if it's something that is important. But I decided that this person having their own thoughts about this other person was actually not that important, not the mountain I wanted to die on, not the argument I wanted to get into with a stranger on the internet. It's not going to be a helpful use of my energy. It's not going to be a beneficial way of spending my time. It's just to leave it and to deal with why this was bothering me so much, instead of trying to change or control them, or just avoid everything altogether that ever brings up any uncomfortable feeling. Using your triggers as your teachers. Why is this bothering me? What is coming up for me right now? And I'll give you another example of another way to handle this from the type of trigger when it's someone closer to you. When it's maybe a family member or a partner, where it's not just necessarily, a stranger on the internet that you can just say whatever, this has nothing to do with me. I'm just going to leave this. Although there is some crossover, but let me explain. This is another thing that happened to me recently, where someone close to me, we were having a conversation. It was starting to get heated. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I actually had this physical trigger, these intense emotions started coming up, And it was almost even a little bit unconscious that I wasn't feeling terribly upset in the conversation, but my body was having a trauma response. Like it was actually like having a fight or flight response. I started shaking, I started sweating, I started having a hard time breathing. And I was sitting there and with this person was saying these things to me, and I was having these physical reactions, and I was upset about what they were saying, but I wasn't, terribly I wasn't like feeling awful about it. I wasn't like, incited with anger or anything like that. I was just like, yeah, I'm kind of annoyed with what you're saying right now and I don't like this. But I was having this physiological response. And so then because I was having this heightened physiological response, it was increasing my irritation about what the person was saying. And I was starting to get kind of prepared to just fight back with what they were saying. But then instead, I caught it. And I took a step back and I took a deep breath and I got curious. What's coming up for me right now? Why am I having this fight or flight, basically trauma response? What is going on? This is so interesting. And I had to take a lot of deep breaths to kind of slow my body down and to just sort of get back into my body as I was having this physiological response. I couldn't think very clearly. That's just what happens when we're having fight or flight responses. All of the blood is going to our limbs to get ready to run away or fight. Our heart rate is increasing to kind of give us that adrenaline, that energy to be able to, deal with the threat or get out of harm's way as quickly as possible, which means that we have less oxygen in our brains, which then, why it's kind of got cloudy headed and that sort of tunnel vision when you're in fight or flight. It's because your body's trying to prepare to protect you. And so bringing yourself back to present by taking some deep breaths, getting the oxygen, literally or, intentionally getting the oxygen back into your brain to slow things down so you can access your rational brain again, because it has shut down. You don't need your rational brain when you're in actual threat. You just need to get out of there or fight it out. And so getting myself back to feeling more grounded, more oxygen in, and then getting curious. What is coming up for me right now? Why am I having this intense response? What this person is saying is annoying me, but it's not the most horrible thing in the world. And then I realized that my control trigger was being hit. That my interpretation was this person with their words and what they were saying was trying to control me. And I have a big control trigger from, stuff that I went through in my past. And just the idea that another human being could be trying to control me brought all these feelings up. And so then I got curious. I was like, okay, this is what's going on. And that curiosity started giving me clarity. And then I was able to consciously remind myself that I'm not in danger. This is not a threat, and this person cannot control me. And as soon as that happened, I was able to calm right down, and then I was able to decide how I wanted to respond to what was happening instead of, react out of that intense emotion and then probably end up doing or saying something that I'd regret. Or then, maybe even afterwards, wanting to avoid that person because I didn't want to get triggered. Do you see how this works? Sort of there's these two benefits to dealing with ourselves when things are impacting us negatively. Is that first of all, we get to learn, we get to grow, we get to figure out, okay, what is going on in here? What do I need to tend to? What I need to work on? If this is coming up for me, then what might I need to do some healing around, do some dealing with, do some, moving through, some growing through. And then also taking a step back allows me to respond and decrease the discomfort of the situation so that I'm not so afraid of it next time. Meaning, if I'm not reacting to something that's happening, something someone says or does, if I'm not having this big reaction to it that then creates a reaction in them that turns into this big, terrible, really uncomfortable, difficult, painful thing, then yeah, I'm probably going to want to avoid ever getting triggered because not only going to bring up the uncomfortable feeling in me, but then I'm going to react to that, and then it's going to create even more of a mess. So I'm going to be more likely to never want to deal with, be around things that affect me negatively because of all of this. But if I can take a step back, take a breath, take a break, get clear on what's going on, and then I can respond intentionally and mindfully to that. Then it might be a difficult situation, but bad doesn't go from bad to worse. It goes from bad to managed, to addressed, to dealt with, to responded to. A lot of that takes building our relationship with ourselves. I would not have been able to do this work, to get that clarity, to be able to connect with myself in that way, to know what was happening. I make it sound easy. This was a lot of time and energy and effort over years of doing this work to make this happen so that I could be that connected with myself. And part of that came through building trust within myself, from being able to trust what I'm thinking and feeling and experiencing so that I can get curious about it, so I can sort it out and sort it through. If you want to learn how to build self-trust, I have a guide for you. It's the simple steps to self-trust. It's in the description below, and it's going to walk you through the steps to start building that more secure, confident, clear relationship with yourself, that more solid relationship with yourself, so that you can trust yourself when things are coming up for you. You can learn to trust your experiences. You can learn to trust yourself to be able to handle things, to be able to work through things, to deal with things, to make choices that are in alignment with the things that are important to you. Having a self-trusting foundational relationship with yourself is the foundation for so many other things in our lives. You can get that guide, that simple steps to self-trust, in the description below. Also, make sure you're on the wait list for the Shift Society. If you found this helpful, let me know what you found helpful in the comment section below. And then if you liked it, take a second, hit the like button. That's extremely helpful for me, for getting this in front of more people, and to let me know that you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And until next time, take good care.